Welcome back. Welcome back. So this is kind of like the part three to a three-part video on season four. Because season four really gives me a lot to talk about. The first video, which is probably going to be the thumbnail, is probably going to have something to do with Rhaenyra and her actions. While the second video is going to be talking about the highlight of this episode, who I actually whose actions I actually understood and liked. Well, I don't want to say liked. I understood them. I was like, finally, I can actually understand what you are doing. Like, and this part three is actually going to touch on a topic that I kind of raised as a question in both parts, which is basically who are the high towers supposed to be, like in relation to Game of Thrones. So the Targaryens, the blacks, who people consider them the Targaryens now because the high towers are now looking like more and more of the leading faction of the Greens, but the Greens are also supposed to be Targaryens. Aegon, Aemon, Daeron are also, and Elena, even Helena too, are all supposed to be Targaryens. This is supposed to be a Targaryen civil war. Everyone, we shouldn't lose the plot. So it's the only reason that the High Towers even have a chance is because they have dragons. Well, they have Targaryens with dragons. Now I'm saying that this is a Targaryen versus High Tower thing. So so the showrunners have been confusing. Like I said in I think the first video about episode 4, they kind of said that Almond is like Tywin. I can see why they're saying that, and I can see similarities. Almond is not Tywin though. Owen is not. He's not Tywin. There are so many things that are not Tywin. Um, First of all, in the books, hell, even in the show, Tywin is only good at fighting wars that he has a specific advantage in. Like if he's equal to his opponent, he's just not fighting them. he's not he's not fighting them. He's going to find another way to beat them. That's one of the reasons he does the red wedding. He has to kind of have an advantage over the person that he's beating before he beats them, which is why when somebody does like, you know, um, they basically do guerrilla tactics like the Starks consistently do, like what Rob Stark specifically did to Tywin. He kind of like, what? He's baffled, like, how are we losing? uh, Partially, part of him losing were also his subordinates, like his son Jamie Lannister making some um, obnoxious ass decisions, and even the Hound losing a quarter of his army. But yeah, Tywin kind of can't win unless he has a specific advantage and also a bigger force. Almond is winning despite having less men and this, maybe not the smallest dragon in the world, but the smallest dragon in the greens. Almond is winning despite that. And obviously, this makes him look kind of more like the Starks. I've seen some people say that Almond Hightower is more like John Connington, who is a character from the books. And I can actually see this. I can actually see this. There's a lot of fake Aegon parts of Almond that are like, first of all, him making some random kid look more Targaryen, not to use him as the decoy, and then probably dyeing the hair of the actual Targaryen that he has, even though the reasons are completely different and the situation are completely different. But those are those two actions are both parallel of the actions of John Connington in books, which for book readers, everyone knows who John Connington is. For show watchers, yeah, I don't know how to explain who John Connington is. The show kind of cuts him out. He's one of the cut characters. He's actually kind of an extremely important character, but they cut him out. They give part of his plot to Jorah Moment, I think. The stone hand thing, what's the disease? I forgot what the disease is called. But they gave that plot. They took it from John Connington and they gave it to Jorah Moment. So yeah, to me the Omens are more like the Starks. So the Omens, the High Towers are more like the Starks. Another thing, I've already kind of been mentioning things that make them similar to the Starks, not just apart from their military strategy and their situation in the war, the general situation of kind of being the underdog and having to like use military trickery strategy, basically. What am I military trickery? Strategy, basically. Having a superior strategy to their opponent and kind of getting in their opponent's head and being like, yeah, make a move. Make a move, I counter that shit. And I guess Omen is more dishonorable about what he's doing, while in the original Game of Thrones, it's the Lannisters that were dishonorable towards the Starks, and then the Starks returned it in kind. So yeah. Another thing is the connection to the religions of the world, of their world. So in their world, there are two competing religions in Westeros. Soon it might be like five competing religions, but in the books. But in the beginning, there are two: the Fate of the Seven and the Old Gods. The Old Gods are strongest or most worshipped in the north and Riverlands, but there are some houses in the Riverlands that also worship the Fate of the Seven. And the new gods are worshipped. The new gods are kind of called the new gods only by the people who worship the old gods. The Fate of the Seven is worshipped in the south, making them like a religious, a, an important religious institution. They are basically the Vatican, basically the Pope. Um, yeah, so Ormond and his faction are connected to them in the same way, but also kind of opposite way that the Starks were connected to the old gods. And the way that they're connected is George has kind of written it very in a very obvious way that the new gods aren't real. The stranger might be real. The stranger who is the seventh, the last one, and he's the god of death, he might be real. He might be the faceless god because, Sirio Pharrell, the faceless men, remember what they said? There is only one God, and that's death, and that's what the stranger represents. So he might be real. But basically everyone, the father, the maiden, the smith, the mother, the clone, yada yada yada, those guys are probably in a way. So, but and this the Starks, even though they believe the old gods are real, they're not really like trying to convert everybody into a old god worshipper, and they're trying to beat specifically new god worshipping enemies. Like I'm sure that's factoring into why they hate some of the enemies, but the Lannisters are kind of agnostic, so they don't really like sometimes the Starks, like Kathleen when she had Jimmy prisoner was mentioning like the gods because she's like a very religious woman who prays to both the new gods and the old gods, which only shows how the Starks kind of are just like, yeah, you can worship whichever god you want, man. I don't care. Even though they probably should be more partial to the old gods, but they're like, yeah, we allow religious freedom, especially among ourselves. We're not. What do we look like? So yeah, the Starks are they're for what they don't have in like advocacy for the old gods that the High Towers have. They have in an actual connection, which materializes in their magic superpowers. All of their skin changer powers, all of their green dream powers, that probably comes from their connection to the old gods and their connection to like the weirwood and the children of the forest. But this isn't a conversation about the magical lore of Game of Thrones. So yeah, so if the High Towers, if the new gods had some magic clouds, like having magic clouds in Game of Thrones is how you prove you're real. like Volo, who is the fire god. I've forgotten what Melisandre calls him. Gotten a lot of names from Game of Thrones, but Volo is the fire god, mostly popular in Essos, and mostly popular with slaves too, which is going to be important for Daenerys' story. But how he proves he's real is, again, magical clouds. The White Walkers, also considered gods. How do they prove they're real? They resurrect dead people and people sacrifice children to them. Magical clouds. Uh, what other? There's a third religion. Oh, the Greyjoys. In the so in the books, not in the show because there's a lot of things the show doesn't adapt. Specifically about the Greyjoys, weirdly enough, the Greyjoys believe in a completely different god, the drowned god, who surprisingly, yes, the drowned god and also the fishmen, they are fish people in Game of Thrones, and they're probably real. Uh, they're probably based on Tolkien's love of Lovecraft, but they're fish people, and there's probably like krakens that like blood. The drowned god also has magical clouds. Literally, the only god in Westeros that doesn't have any magical clouds is the Fate of the Seven, which is it's very sad that those are the gods the High Towers have chosen to be connected to. But in the main series, the High Towers are more open to using magic. So I mean, these High Towers would never. These High Towers are like magic hating. The dragons are abominations. So yeah, the connection to the religions of the world is actually very similar, and it's actually in its differences that we see the unique way that the High Tower uses their own connection, which is like an actual material connection to the faith. That they're probably the power behind the faith, unlike the Starks, who it doesn't even really the religion of the old gods is so widespread that they don't need like a central like religious organization or religious authority like what the faith is. Like I feel like Jordan Watt is trying to say something that it's the fake religion that needs like a central authority, like a central organization that needs to like, burn down weirwood trees in the places where most people are now faith of the seven worshippers in order to exist. I feel like he's trying to say something, but yeah, um, let's not. So, another similarity, almond lessons are clearly perverted lessons of like perverted lessons are clearly like corrupted lessons of the Stark lessons, corrupted versions of the Stark lessons. Because what's the first thing that Ned Stark teaches us after um he executes that guy, the guy who ran away from the Night's Watch because he saw a White Walker? Yeah, a man who passes the sentence must swing the sword, which the High Towers, Almond seems to do that. Almond seems to at least live by that because he was asking Day One to be the one to actually do the killing in order to desensitize Day One from killing and probably further manipulate him as a pawn in his war. But yeah, um, so his lesson is just like a corrupted version of the Stark lessons, and even his "you must be firm," but just listen. These are Stark lessons. He isn't teaching him like, oh, be the most manipulative schemer in the room, like the Lannisters probably teach their children. He's teaching him like, oh, be kind, but be like strong, but just um listen to your subordinates, but also be wise too. Don't let them control what you think. These are Stark lessons, but he's like using them in a way to like manipulate him. Which, speaking of Daemon, another similarity is the fact that he's not really a secret Targaryen. He's not really a secret Targaryen, but the High Tower have basically a secret Targaryen. They even dye his hair the same color as them and everything. which so I know for the people that are saying that he's more John Connington will be like, oh, that is an obvious Fagon John Connington thing. That is a young Griff thing. Like Jon Snow doesn't do that. Jon Snow's hair is just naturally black. If we end up later finding out that Daeron doesn't dye his hair and his hair is just red, then yeah, then like my point is going to be more proven. So yeah, but I kind of want the theory that Daeron is dyeing his hair red just because of Almond. I would kind of deepen how terrible to him Almond is. So yeah, the their mysterious past. So the High Towers in the Game of Thrones universe, in the show, they seem to be like a staunchly Andal house. They worship all of the Andal gods. Their allies with under Andal houses. They trade. The way they trade, like they're Andals. They're supposed to be Andals. In the books, their origins are way more mysterious. So the original High Towers actually dates back to the Age of Heroes. Yeah, and for those who don't know, the Age of Heroes is before the Andal invasion, and the Andal invasion is now why all of the main houses that are in charge in the main series in House of the Dragon, in Night of the Seven Kingdoms, in Game of Thrones, Andal houses um like the Casterlys and then the Lannisters. The Casterlys are kind of like the Lannisters' parents' house. It's the Casterlys are the house that the Lannisters boot out of power in order to take power of Castle Rock. The Gardeners before the Tyrells come. Um, the people of the Vale, the Arons, all of those houses are under houses. And Loki, I probably need to make a video on the different ethnicities because people get very weird when they're talking about like ethnic groups in House of the Dragons and in the Dance of the Dragons as a whole because there are like tension between like people are like, oh, race as a concept doesn't really exist in in the the books. And it's like, yeah, but there are different ethnic groups and there are struggles between different ethnic groups. There are some groups that align way more with each other than other groups. And there are some groups that are trying to make their own religion the most practiced religion and control all pieces of information. Like there are clearly ethnic tensions and everyone is racist to Dawn. Mostly the Andals, but pretty much everybody is racist to Dawn. It's literally it's literally definitely racist. Like Dawn is the most east, southern eastern looking like faction slash territory in the region. And so everybody, and also the fact that they were the only people to not get conquered by the dragons that probably built a bit of a sense with. But yeah, like ethnicity has a lot to do with it. And that's a video for another time. If you want to see that, comment down below. But yeah, the mysterious past, it's kind of like up in the air whether or not they are first men because they seem to be have been around during the age of heroes during the time of the first men. But they're also obviously more under and they married into the Tyrells, which is how they managed to preserve their power when the Tyrells came to power. And then they now married into the Targaryens. It seems to be the main thing, which is funny because the Starks kind of failed at that. The Starks were supposed to marry into power twice. First with the Baratheons. Well, in fact, first with the Dance of the Dragons. Yeah, in the Dance of the Dragons, there's a pact called the Pact of Ice and Fire, where Jesse's daughter, Jace says that when he eventually has a daughter, his daughter is going to marry Cregan Stark's son and going to make a pact between the Starks and the Targaryens. It probably had something to do with the prophecy. We didn't get to. It's so weird. The show goes out of its way to include the prophecy, but doesn't include the moment where the prophecy would have made the most sense to be in. Like Jace was barely in the start, and he was barely in Winterfell. He was barely at the war. We didn't see anything with Jace. There was supposed to be a whole thing. Like he would first go to the Mandalorians and ask them for their support. He would go to Craig and Stark, but Craig and Stark would be like, "Well, my uncle is kind of tripping, so I have to deal with him." Jace would probably help him deal with him because Dragon, and then he would have a thing with Sarah Snow. There are some people that are in canon. No, this isn't my own fan fiction, but in canon, some people even say that Jace and Cregan were themselves lovers, but it seems like more of a big brother, little brother dynamic. Like Cregan becomes very, very close with Jace. So close, in fact, that because Cregan lost his little brother before he ever met Jace, probably to his uncle, if I remember right. And Jace also lost his brother during the dance, so they probably bonded and they found common interests, like the show says, but the show said it and they didn't do it. It's like it's so weird. They show the Starks in episode 1, but they never show the Starks again. Was the war that expensive to make? Like, I'm so confused. Like, why show the Starks at all if you're going to show them in the beginning of season 2, but never show them again in season 2? I won't say I hope season 3 does something better with it, but I'm they're probably going to be reintroduced in 2028 when season 2 comes out. So season 2 when season 4 comes out. So yeah, the High Towers have this mysterious past where they are apparently they hold the High Tower that they get their name from is apparently even older than the first men. So they're like a very mysterious house, kind of like the Danes, who are also very similar to the Starks. Another video for another time. So this is related to this theory. The misters in House of Dragon throughout like season 1 were very weird. Like obviously the mister that was the mister at the time in Viserys' court was scheming with Otto, but the way he was scheming with Otto was extremely strange. They could just write stuff as him being like a politician at that very moment and siding with certain political allies, and even Orwell ends up doing that. And Orwell actually starts off as like a minister that's actually attempting to be like a good guy and not kill Viserys. I don't think the Greens killed Viserys, by the way, at the very least on purpose, but Orwell is a Green. Orwell was trying to save Viserys, and he was a member of the Green. So the way all of them act, plus Orwell, plus Rhaenyra's own Mister, who is always basically advising her to do nothing, plus the Mister in Boris Baratheon's court that he read Rhaenyra's whole long letter and only chose the part that he probably knew would piss off Boris Baratheon. So in the in the fan base, there's basically this theory that the misters there's a mister conspiracy to kill all the dragons. In fact, it's not even in his fan base. In the canon, there is a mister. I've forgotten his name. I think Bart. No, I think it's Bart. I don't think it's Bart. There is a mister in the real canon that like loves talking. He's basically a wizard. That I think Sam meets him when he goes to the old town. Another character that they cut from the show. He's basically a wizard. He knows magic and stuff. He has glass candles, which glass candles are kind of used to either see the future or teleport into somebody's mind. I think they're a Valerian invention. So he's like the masters are trying to act like magic don't exist. They're trying to wipe magic from the face of the earth. It's a conspiracy. He's basically the Joe Rogan of for he's basically the Joe Rogan of Westeros. They're putting they're putting chemicals in the water and it's turning the frogs. Um, so yeah, he's like, magic actually does exist. The ministers know it, and the ministers are trying to get rid of it. Hell, they probably did it before, and because of that one line, he said everybody has basically been have had that theory that in the books, if you look in specific points at the dance of the dragon, the ministers are acting very weird. They're not trying to bring back any of the dragons. They are not, which makes sense. They don't like the dragons. Um, they're not even trying to study. Well, they are probably studying them, but just not to preserve them. The masters are basically in every house, in every major house. So they would have a lot of like political clout. So their goals, if they are trying to get rid of the dragon, their goals will actually be not that hard to do. And with what the show is doing with the High Towers, they kind of already confirmed the Mr. Conspiracy to be a thing, which I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that. I kind of feel seen almost because my theory, but also like, what is the show going to do with it? Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's basically my video. Um, like, comment, share, subscribe, do all that. Um, yeah, the high towers are evil stocks. Yeah.